Hello, it's Dr. Bettina here from Nip in the Bud. We've had a letter from a grandparent. It reads, I'm really concerned for my grandson who is 12 and seems to be showing signs of obsessively checking his appearance, finding something constantly wrong with how he looks, having to check mirrors sometimes for hours. I know there's quite a lot of body shaming in the household and I don't know how to tackle it. Can you help? So thank you so much for your question. I think you're right to be concerned, but let's break it down just a little bit. The first thing that struck me about your letter is to think about your grandson's age, so that we know that his teenage brain has just switched on, which means that there is a shift to focusing on identity and this huge self-consciousness that comes. 12-year-olds are aware in a very different way of how others see them. And there's this strong desire to fit in and to belong. So we know that that's happening. Some degree of self-focus and focus on the body and what I look like in a different way is to be expected. But I have to say the level of repeated checking and distress about appearance that you describe does suggest that this could be more of an anxiety-based problem, or certainly developing into one. So I don't know if you've heard of a term called body dysmorphophobia. It basically means that somebody has an extreme preoccupation with what they perceive to be defects or something wrong in their appearance or their body. There's something also a bit obsessive about his checking that's a bit suspicious. So here are some ideas for where to start. And then I want to talk a little bit about your comment about body shaming in the household, because I think that could be significant and something that we need to address. So let's talk first of all about what you could do. The first thing I would recommend is to comment gently on what you notice while validating his experience. So you might say something like, I've noticed you're making really negative comments and seem quite distressed about your body. Or I've noticed that you're checking a lot, looking in the mirror to look at your body. I wonder what's going on. Now, it's really tempting to offer reassurance. You look great. You don't need to worry about that. But actually, sometimes that can miss the mark and a young person or another person doesn't feel validated. It doesn't connect very well to their experience. So it's better to say something like, it seems like it's really upsetting you. Now, you're not agreeing that it's something to be upset about, but you're just commenting on what your grandson is experiencing. I probably don't need to say this to you, but never joke about it or laugh about it or shame him for the comments about his behaviour. But that's the first thing, commenting gently on what you notice. The next thing is to open up the conversation a little. So you've commented and noticed his experience. And after that, you want to see if you can get him to reflect a little bit on what's happening. So you might say something like, does it help, the checking? You know, I know it must be tempting to check quite a lot, but does it make you feel better? He will probably say no, because if it did make him feel better, he wouldn't have to keep checking. But actually, what the checking tends to do is keep the thoughts alive for him. And he's probably not aware of that at the moment. So try to have this conversation of opening up at a time when things are calm. Maybe when you're out and about, when you're on a walk, when you're in a car, doing something else. In the moment of upset, actually, he probably doesn't have much distance from his thoughts because he's going to be very emotionally invested in them. And he might believe wholly what his brain is telling him. So in these conversations outside of the moment, you might have an opportunity to get him to shift and see things a little bit differently. Examining these thoughts and beliefs that young people have is such a powerful thing to do in conversation with them. Young people often don't know that we don't have to believe all the thoughts that we have. You know, our brains tell us things and we can reject them. So that would be the next thing, is to see if you can help him to open up the conversation and get a little bit of distance from his thoughts and his behaviour. And the third thing that I would suggest, if that has gone well, is to begin to suggest some limits. So this needs to be gentle and it needs to be on his terms. And ideally, it is a co-created solution. But ask him if he's ever tried to limit the checking to see if that helps or to see how that goes. You might make some suggestions like replacing the checking with an alternative behaviour. So you might say to him, every time you feel like going to check in the mirror, why don't you turn around, do some heavy breathing, go for a little walk, something like that. Or you could suggest taking the mirrors away and say, should we take them away and see what happens? So you're gently trying to see if he can shift some of the compulsive checking behavior. Now, this approach may not go so well, and you might find a child who's shutting down or maybe increasing the behavior. And there is definitely a time when you need to seek outside help. We know that there are treatments that are very helpful for this, particularly something called exposure and response prevention for these obsessive anxiety type behaviors. And it is better to start those treatments early. So if you have made some of these approaches that I've recommended here and they're really not shifting things, then I would go to your GP and see if they can make a referral to some specialist services. So seeking help would be indicated if this is very intense. It's happening many, many times a day. It's been ongoing for a number of weeks. He can't speak about it, and your gentle interventions are not shifting or even making things a bit worse. And also if the child's life functioning is impaired, if they're not sleeping, they're not going to school, they're not meeting up with their friends, this is also a reason to seek outside help. Obviously, if your grandson is at risk of harm or anybody is at risk of harm to themselves or others, you need to seek urgent support. And then the other thing I wanted to address was the comment that you made about there being body shaming in the household. This is important and potentially having a really big impact on your grandson. He's going through this teenage brain stage and he's developing his self-identity, and there's this new relationship to his idea about who he is in his body, and he needs to have good voices around him saying the right things. So how you approach this is tricky. It's going to depend on your relationship with his parents, but ideally you're able to have a calm and gentle conversation with them. You could be navigating quite a delicate relationship, and you have to remember that you're not his parents. So you need to respectfully go through them and talk to them about this. If you come on too strong, your opinions could be met with some defensiveness. The parent may feel criticized, and then your intervention could backfire. So I would conduct this conversation with great sensitivity. Instead, what I would focus on is asking really thoughtful and open-ended questions, maintaining genuine curiosity with the parents and trying to really withhold judgment. So you could ask the mum or the dad, have you noticed that he's been doing a lot of checking in the mirror? Ask what they think may be going on, because the parents may well have been thinking about it. And then you might say, I wonder what else is playing into this situation. I wonder if there's anything we can do in the environment that might help him. Now, I would hope that might lead to a conversation about, let's just not talk about bodies. Let's make sure we don't do any of that as he's going through this phase. As you can tell, the approach that I'm recommending in terms of how you approach it with the parents and how you approach it with your grandson is to move gently, to tentatively share your concerns and be very thoughtful in how you approach it. Start with that. But I would also say that if there is no shift over time, then I think you may need to step in a firmer way, because anxiety-based problems like this really do need a whole family behind them, and they may well need some intervention in order to make things better for your grandson. A firmer approach, if you are really concerned, is to step in and always go through the parents, but say, I'm not going to sit by and watch this. It's been ongoing. We've tried gently to help him, but I really think we need to seek some professional help. And then I would take your grandson, preferably with the permission of his parents, to see the GP, and they will refer you on, probably to CAMS, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, where they can get some intervention to help him. I really hope this is helpful. Really good luck with that. And if anybody else has any questions, please drop a note to Nip in the Bud, and we will do our best to help where we can. Thank you.